Is going to be all about information architecture in light of AI. Curious, you guys, anybody coming from any on-prem or still classic structure? Yes. You deal with that a lot. Are you online now?
Yes.
Okay.
Tries to get people to cloud.
Okay.
And so we run into a lot of people.
Been there. That was my previous role. So it's like, don't look at what we do. Just listen to what we're telling you, because the cobbler's kids and all that jazz. Pretty soon the expo hall will be officially open. As you were saying, being a community event, the sponsors are super, super, super important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So go grab their swag because they don't want to take it home, and thank them for being here. There's a chance this does not match exactly what we're going to do because I rebuilt the deck last night at midnight. Because what else are you going to do? And I did not circle back to the agenda. So that's fine. It's going to be fun. If we've never met before, my name is Joy Apple. I am a Microsoft MVP, and I've been in the Microsoft space for about 18 years now. Oh gosh, I think that ticks up in August, but we're not going to do that math right now. I am a total governance and information architecture nerd. It came out of desperation and trauma because about 16 years ago, I was doing a gig as the SharePoint person for a company in the DoD space, and I helped a Navy contract team elevate folders that were so deeply nested that, links didn't work, right? You had to use URL dissection to get to anything. Search wasn't finding anything. That was back in the good old days of fast search. And when the backup utility was running, those links were so long I couldn't get to it. It was like, yeah, it's there, but good luck. So that really sparked and put in my mind the importance of information management. I co-host with Christian Buckley and Ragnar Heil, Guardians of M365 Governance, fun little monthly webcast we do, and I talk a lot. So that's mostly while I'm here today. But AI readiness. We say this all the time. I think we're tired of hearing the buzzwords, to be honest. When we really start thinking about it, it's not just about Copilot, or all those little things. It's about being ready. It's governance. It's the topics that personally I've been talking about for almost 20 years, making sure that technically we are ready. We have the licensing straightened out. We've got, we're running the right apps. We've got everything enabled correct. The new Outlook, the new Teams, all those things. Content readiness, which is a lot about what today is, making sure that content is ready. Are we leveraging the best practices that Microsoft and the community put forward for Microsoft 365? Are we leveraging group-connected collaboration workspaces? Is our architecture flat? Are we doing all the things? But it's also people readiness. Now, this is not a conversation that we're going to get into today. Well, we might talk about it a little in my prompt engineering session later today. Shameless plug. But I would say people readiness is probably the hardest part because we're talking about changing human behavior. And it's people that are already doing their full-time job. They're already doing their contracts and they're already doing all those things. Now we're asking them to change that. And nobody likes change unless it's their idea. Even then, it's good for you, but don't make me do it. But if we're not ready, it's a little risky. And especially in light of, and I really enjoy the fact at Microsoft, they don't even call it the Copilot SKU or anything like that. They call it the $30 SKU. Because it ain't cheap, right? So if we are putting forth the time, the effort, and the finances to move into this AI era, it's really risky to not be ready because we're going to get bad responses. Data will be incorrect. And hopefully we are really internalizing that Microsoft is calling it Copilot, not the pilot. Because we have to make sure that information it's giving us is correct. And if our architecture is not right, there's a good chance the data is not right in some way. Unsecured content. We're all hearing the story, like the big example is the employee finds the spreadsheet of all of the salaries and wailing and gnashing of teeth. That is a risk, but there are also other risks, such as compliance situations, legal problems, all that good stuff. When those things start to happen and they pile up, And over and over and over again, you get a lack of adoption. So now we've bought X number of $30 SKUs and it's going out the window. And I can relate because when Copilot in PowerPoint first hit, I was like, oh yeah, because I was lured away from banking and the financial industry by the glamour of IT and the promise of doing nothing but creating PowerPoint presentations for all the meetings. So I was like, yes, let's do this. Not great, not great, not, it was not great, especially if you have a corporate template. And you're like, well, it's supposed to be smart. Sure, it's artificial, but it's still intelligence. Okay, let's do this. No, it just used the title slide for everything. I was like, wah, wah. So I was talking to Sharon Weaver, who's actually here presenting this week. And she was like, oh, I use it all the time. I was like, really? I was like, oh, it has been a year. Maybe I should go try again. Right? But it was a bad response, bad response, bad response. I was like, I'm done. Not going to waste my time anymore. We're not ready. And sometimes the tech's not quite ready for what we want it to do. That adoption don't happen. So let's jump into the good stuff. Information architecture. So we're going to take a little mini trip down memory lane for just half a minute here. Think about that old school way of doing information architecture. And it's funny, these days, we don't tend to think of like the file share or your P drive or all that as information architecture. Oops. Yep. Okay. But when we go look at the way this is, right, the names of these folders is metadata. And probably quite a few of these have paths, physical structures that go down, 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 down for the architecture. And many, many, many of us took this mode, this way of thinking, and we translated it into SharePoint. Because it's just an online file share, right? In SharePoint on-prem, we tended to build out structures like this. So I do go way back. I first came on the scene during the MOS days, Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007, just rolls off the tongue. And typically, well, I inherited a SharePoint farm that was a hot mess. But when I started owning it and I started doing things as a consultant, I would tend to build these out as separate site collections. In fact, these would be in separate content databases and all kinds of good stuff, right? But at the top, you would start, and this would be open. This would be the landing page for everyone in the organization. Here's all the stuff you need to know about the IT department, right? Then we break permissions and we go down to our department private areas, right? And the further down you go, the more restrictive the permissions got. It was like this funnel. And it worked beautifully back then. But we really, really, really don't want to do that now because modern best practice architecture is going to be a flat architecture. In fact, so flat that we go to that deeper nested structure like this. And to be fair, before I click this, those things that were way, way down, if we had a decent usage of nested folders down there, things weren't going well, right? Even then, the flatter, the better. Even then, metadata was king. So we take that concept and we start to flatten it out. Kids these days in their flat architecture. We build these out as top-level sites. In fact, so this is based off of a diagram in Xmind, Ruth, that each one of these, right, standalone sites. So communication site, everyone in the organization is welcome there. Then we have a team site per functional area of the business, tied to a team, right? Because we're modern, we're doing all the things, because we're the cool kids. In the real world, like human resources, that would probably actually branch out very wide, right? Because human resources is going to have groups and teams of people that need to work with things that have different permissions than the other groups in their department. So that could actually scale out kind of wide. And in fact, modern architecture is kind of wide. And this was me just making something up for a demonstration. But this was based actually off of a real customer way back in the day of maybe 3 years ago. But flatten it out, raising everything up to be a top-level site instead of a subsite of a subsite of a subsite in that deeper, classic site collection architecture. In fact, we have lots of fun battles these days about Well, stop calling it a site. It's a site collection. Well, yeah, it's a site collection, but do you guys want to venture a guess as to what the technical definition of a site collection is? Don't know. A collection of sites, which means we're nesting. We don't want to do that. So I found myself, even though, yes, that is technically correct, if we do that, we're still kind of embracing that old school way of thinking. We might start building that way. So we go from nested, flatten it out. Search works better, which means Copilot's going to work better because that action's on the graph, right? The user experience is better. You know, I made this comment to a customer a few years ago, so I should probably update my number. But I was like, 30 years ago, folders were new. What do you mean? I said, well, you're worried because the concept of flat architecture, more libraries, more metadata, fewer folders is going to freak people out. And it does. Because it's new. Folders were new once. We had to think about how to do that. I was like, so it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So how do we get started then if we're in that deeper kind of more nested way of building out the content? Because humans, we do, like squirrels, we love to bury things. I found this. I'm going to put it somewhere because it's mine and nobody can get to it. Well, then Travis comes along and he finds a different copy of it somewhere. He's like, awesome. I'm going to put this where I can find it. Now we've all got our own copy in our own cubby hole, and who knows which one is the correct piece of information now because it's not tied to the source. So how do we get started fixing it? The number one thing is to ditch those nested structures. Has anyone had that conversation of like, look, I know you really love your folder structure, but we've got to raise it up? How does that conversation usually go? Okay.
We're going to lose stuff. We're not going to be able to find things.
Okay.
I'm not going to know where things are. I'm not going to know if I lost the thing in place.
That's fair.
Like they're flipping the table on.
And they're losing control of their content. That's fair. That's fair. It feels valid because I controlled the structure. And I think one of the challenges of that is when you have that person and they go build out that structure, they build it the way they think about it. So when another team member comes in, that's not how I think about it. I would do a folder per quarter and then put the things in that instead of doing it by project and put the quarters in the project, right? So we all think about it differently. And I think that's where the duplication and sprawl starts to come in, which creates the inaccuracy because everybody's got their own way of doing it. But if we ditch those nested structures and we flatten those I have a customer. So my company, Orchestry, we have a tool that kind of scans the environment and gives health checks. It gives reports. It gives recommendations. One of their recommendations says, hey, you've got a site with 192 subsites. Now, does that go straight down? I don't think it could. But my experience with SharePoint, and I say this, my social media, I am the joy of SharePoint. My experience with SharePoint is she will always give you enough rope to hang yourself and won't say a word. Well, why does it let me do that if I'm not supposed to do that? It's SharePoint. It's just how it is. I know. It's just, women, it's how it is. So we go in, we flatten that out. When we're in that process, you can identify those sites, those subsites, those sub-sites that should probably be a little bit independent. I used to talk about security and permissions because the top level site in the site collection was the parent. And then those child sites inherited things from them. And you could break permissions because that's sometimes your kids, they grow up, they go off to college, they leave the house, they start making their own rules. Okay? Sometimes some of those sites deserve their own independence. They need their own rules, probably because their permission inheritance has been broken. They don't inherit that permission model from the parent. That is a really good candidate for a top-level site, a new site, a team. Teamify that groupify, teamify, right? Create that modern structure. Now we're going to layer in the ability to still have control. And I've even been known to pitch that of like, now you're not under this, so you don't have to worry about what happens up here anymore. There's no concern there. You have freedom because you're on your own now, kid, right? You can layer on that real-time communication and collaboration from teams, get the power of planner and loop and all of those assets that you kind of had to fight with to get in those deeper nested structure. Raise it up, you get more autonomy, you get better permissions, better search experience, better Copilot experience, more tools. Now, sometimes we have to grow into those tools. Ruth, we were talking about that yesterday, right? Well, they're not going to use Planner yet. But one day someone's going to see it and go, I want that. Can't have it in a subsite. Sorry. Can't have that in your whatever. Sorry. But wait, there's more. We can elevate that, get all the cool stuff. And honestly, I put this because it just sounded neat. If it's 5 clicks deep, Copilot's not finding it fast. In fact, this is going to relate to deep folders and subsites or subsites 198 times. But the deeper that content is, the less effective the graph is at finding it. Approximately 3 levels deep is the sweet spot. And I say approximately because the length of the URL is a direct impact. If we're really, really, really wordy in how we name things, you might get 2 levels deep. If you keep it super short and sweet, you might get 6. You know, I'm an old consultant. It depends, right? It depends on what you do and how you do it. But we definitely know the deeper it goes, the less relevant the results, the data that Copilot brings back to you is going to be. We were running some tests last year at Orchestry. We were speaking at the M365 conference in Vegas, and it was a ton of fun. But one of the tests we did is, Travis, cover your ears. Don't take this back to home base. But we all know marketing people kind of think about the world a little bit different than the rest of us. And our marketing team's team was created by a marketing team, right? There are folders. There's 3 folders for everything. So we were using that as our example of what not to do. David's idea. And we would search for things that we knew, and Copilot was like, I'm not finding it. Do you mean this? And we'd be like, ooh, screenshot. I mean, it was a really good example of the deeper that content is, the less relevant it's going to be. So to break it down and get it all up on the screen in one shot here, those folders that are following the permission of the site already, those should probably be libraries. If the permission is the same, make it a library. If it's a folder, even if it's on a SharePoint site, not in a file share somewhere, and it has unique permissions, I would still seriously consider making that a site. Because if it's important content that needs to be set apart and different from everything around it, it means we probably actually need to architect and put it somewhere where it's set apart and different from everything else around it. It's going to reduce the risk of security breaches. In teams, utilizing multiple channels is going to be a huge win, not only for your AI readiness, but your team's adoption as well. Because it's one of my favorite reports I show to our customers at Orchestry. If you've got 500 of your 700 teams and they're all just using the general channel, it means they've got a nested mess of folders in that files tab of the general channel. That or they're doing it all in group chat somewhere. And so everything's in OneDrive. That's fun. But if we break out those channels, that means we're going to be getting multiple multiple folders, but they're flatter, right? They're not going nested. Personally, since I'm an old school kind of grumpy SharePoint person, I prefer to have multiple libraries in that site that's connected to the team and tab to them in the teams. But that definitely takes work unless you've got some automated process to build that out. And then again, thinking about our SharePoint site collections, elevate those subsites. If you've got 5 subsites under a top-level site and the permissions are all the same, could they be consolidated? Is all that content relevant? Or do you have that one subsite that hasn't been touched in 3 years? We all just know it's there, but we don't really need it anymore. It's just there. Things to think about. When we take that approach and we go from that nested feel, that nested structure with broken permissions, that should be assigned to us too, the fact that we call it broken permissions. Right? Why are we breaking things? That's why we can't have nice things. But if we take that concept, flatten it out along with our lists or libraries and all that good stuff, then you get things that still look like this. And I fought with the concept of this slide for a while, or this X-Mind that I had, but it looks deep. But if you think about it, news and announcements, that's a web part, that's a SharePoint library. Links, it's a list, right? These are flat items on the site, even though this looks nested. But again, breaking it out, I keep doing that. Communication site, everybody welcome. And then teams and their connected team site, everywhere in the environment, those groups need to work together and have permissions different from everybody else in the environment. It goes all, I don't have the example here, but some of my diagrams I'll do, you'll have a blue square, which represents Viva Engage. Who here has used Yammer in the past? Awesome. Are you using Viva Engage now? Trying to transition. Very good, very good. I know a lot of us did use Yammer in the past and maybe it wasn't great. And then when people started talking about Viva Engage, they're like, no. Nope, been there, done that. Don't do it. I don't want to do it. But in the modern world and modern architecture, if I have everything in Teams that we want to chat about, we could have a whole conversation about notification noise. That's a thing. Putting it in Viva Engage helps with that. But when I'm talking to Copilot and I need it to look at sources for data, should it be looking at the Viva Engage content? Should it be looking at the more social content? Should it be looking at the things when I'm writing my report that's nice to know and fun and more social, not the business critical things? Because, well, it was Joy and Travis and talking about it and they talk together all the time because they're in the same department. So obviously that should feed in. But if I have it in Viva Engage, I can tell it we're not looking at Viva Engage. Just look at Teams and Outlook. Right? So it can help in that perspective too, the right tool for the right job. And I very much encourage you to think about apps like that as part of your information architecture strategy. There's a SharePoint site behind it, right? There's a SharePoint site behind everything, right? SharePoint still rules the world because that's where all the stuff lives. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So the ones that are like the lighter colors,
Ooh.
those are communication sites?
Well, the way I did it, so this is just a label.
Right.
Anything teal is SharePoint.
Okay. Whether it's a communication site.
Correct. So like this particular one, this was actually based on a customer of mine. Finance and accounting, they had their own system that they used. They didn't really put much in SharePoint. But it would still be really nice for the rest of the company to know who's who, be able to get to a policy, a procedure, some instruction, a contact list. So we built an information page. It's just a page in the Pages library on the intranet home site. And then it got a link on the navigation for the intranet. You can't tell looking at a link. Is it a site? Is it a page? Is it I don't know. So they didn't need a whole site. They really didn't want one either because they were a little freaked out about it. It's like, that's fine. Yep, they needed a place where everyone in the organization could have access to their content. But they did definitely, in fact, this particular customer, they had multiple teams with connected team sites because they had 3 or 4 functional business units in their department, right? And they needed security between those. Yep. Oop. No worries. Top level content, always. I know I'm harping on this, but it's kind of in the name, right? Information architecture. The higher up it is, the much more better and efficiently and faster that content's going to get actioned by the graph. And that doesn't matter if it's search or if it's Copilot. So advantages, faster. It's going to be faster. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to scale better. And who knows, this might be an older statistic, but I'm going to run with it. Who knows how long the average end user will wait for a page on their intranet to load? At about half a second or a second, they will start getting impatient. They'll report to IT or put in a help ticket if that page is not loaded within a second. Who here opens the microwave before the ding goes off? We are not patient people, right? Faster, more scalable. Simpler security. Yes. SharePoint admins? Anyone ever had to go through the classic SharePoint admin center to find out where Bob had access in the environment? How did we? We had to click it all. And in fact, even in the modern SharePoint admin center, right? If I go in there and I have site collections, because maybe I just haven't re-architected the old stuff when we moved for whatever reason, it's still only going to show you that top level site. And if there's subsites, you got to work for it. You got to work for it, man. We already got enough work to do. The flatter our architecture is, the fewer tangled up knots of broken permissions that we have to worry about, which means it's going to reduce oversharing concerns. Because how many times, sorry, but Denver is dry, y'all. I gotta keep chugging the water. How many times have we seen, especially when, who here used Delve? I loved Delve. Delve was my Monday morning buddy. What was I doing last week? Who do I need to circle back to? What was that thing? Delve. The people lost their minds in 2014 when they popped open Delve. I can see what the CEO is doing. Yeah, because you have access to it. Lost their minds because the permissions weren't right, because we were so used to security by obscurity. Oh, they'll never find it there. Or we didn't know. It was just so complicated. We just, I'm going to say presumed it was right. My mama taught me, you never assume. So the flatter we go, the much simpler that security picture gets. And then it's built to flex. And I can't claim that. ChatGPT came up with that bullet. It and Copilot and I, we worked together as a tag team to make sure there wasn't too much text on the screen. Flat information architecture is going to make reorg so much easier. When I worked in the government world, we reorged every 6 months, whether we needed to or not. As a new manager or a new PM or a new this or a new that, it was chaos. And they had built that 2007 farm according to the org chart, which changed every 6 months, whether it needed to or not. Build it to flex. Using those hub sites, you can just move stuff around. It is magical. You don't have to migrate because it doesn't have to go anywhere. It doesn't have to go anywhere. Nothing has to move. But it's intimidating. It is weird. When modern first started in 2017, 2018, which in some ways feels like forever, but it's really not that long ago. This is literally what my brain created when I was sitting there on the call with Microsoft Product Group and they were talking about the vision forward for architecture. But I'm used to awesomecompany.sharepoint.com/site/this/this/this/this/this. It's like, well, if it's not /HR/benefits, it's just /benefits. It's like, oh, it's going to get lost. It's just out there floating around in my tenant. But then you go, no. It's still awesomecompany.sharepoint.com. It still makes sense. It's still there. It's just we're raising it up, right? We're still within the confines of our tenant. It's actually a little easier because if you memorize URLs, it's a little easier to deal with that way. So they do stay connected. They're not necessarily floating around in the ether. And the advantages, once you start getting into search and security and permissions and management, far outweighs the security of that old managed path. Speaking of security, how are we doing so far? We good? Any new ideas or thoughts? It's my excuse to drink more water. Yes.
So I'm very guilty of leaning towards that folder metadata information. I like nesting, like putting that information.
Sure.
Folder structure and human code lot of information about.
Mhm.
I even had customers who were like, our org chart, it is our file share. Like, that is the org chart. You can see where the departments are, you can see
Yeah.
the internal operations built on and around the file share. How do you, so I think I'm persuaded by the like flat architecture.
Mhm.
How do you think about, say, naming these new sites and units in a way? Is naming the way to move that metadata?
Yeah.
Is there a better place for it? I know, I mean, I guess like how does that interact with, like you said, the concerns about folder name length or URL name length?
Sure.
Like you could dump hyphen.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Put a whole bunch of that folder
Yep.
metadata into a new name. That feels like you're running into the same problem.
You would definitely run into the same problem. So what I learned that lesson when the Moss farm was built by the org chart, build it by process. That process probably won't change much. If it does, it's probably a broken process and it probably needs to change, and we're going to make it better because we're optimists here. But if you build it by process, then you are going to be much less likely to run into those issues. And let's say finance and accounting. They probably have processes for contracts and invoicing and things like that. So that can lead you down that logical path of what we're going to call it. In fact, the folder names probably will still work for library names, maybe even site names. But then, Ruth, I'm going to go old school, girl. Instead of like multiple folders, we could reduce that by leveraging those views in the library and use columns for that metadata. Maybe I need one bit. I'm going to oversimplify this. And I know this is going to be way oversimplified. But let's pretend I'm on the contract site and I've got a library per project. Inside of each of those libraries, I could have a column that separates those types of contracts or the phases or the whatever. Because I've seen where you go from one phase to another. When you're completed with this phase, move it to this folder. Well, now you can just flip that metadata tag in the dropdown and the view acts just like a folder. It says, okay, you only want to see, you build that view according to that. It's beautiful. It's different. I worked with a lady, hang on, Miss Barbara. She's in Nebraska, the Omaha area, oil and gas. Oil and gas moves slow, right? Big wheels move slow. And I was helping her with the engineering team. Yeah, oil and gas plus engineer, we know it's a challenge. And she was like, I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. I hate SharePoint. It's just, I was like, Miss Barbara, stick with me. Let's just build a couple of tests. You can play with it. And then go find one of your buddies, one of the more friendly engineers, see what they think. Then about 90 days, we had the majority of their content flattened out and metadata tagged. And she said, well, I never thought I would say this, but I think I like SharePoint now. I said, yep, another one bites the dust. Got him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I explained to them that they already had it, but their folders by what they needed,
Yep.
all of their folders. And for some reason that just clicked.
Yes.
Showing them an example, which is really critical, especially when
And they need to see it. Engineers have to see everything.
to search and find their information.
Mm-hmm.
3 clicks or less. That saves them time, and
Yeah.
you've got that engagement. You've got your power user.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I find that explaining that their folders, they already have all their metadata.
Mm-hmm.
Just by what they've named it.
Definitely.
I find that to be a very helpful way to understand what term sets are.
Oh, term sets. That's a good name. But yeah, 100 agree with that. I'm going to reinforce what Ruth just said for online folks, that the names of those folders are 100% metadata. And I would go so far, if we have a challenge of needing to shorten the metadata, if you think about it, you can condense the name of that, especially if you're putting some metadata in columns in the library. You don't have to rely on spelling it out every time you name a file or a document. And I went through with my Navy team, and I was like, you don't have to put the name of your project on everything. Right? It doesn't have to be Acme Corporation working files, Acme Corporation product, we know We know what it is. The name of the site says it. So that's already part of the property bag of what's here, right? You got this.
I use for animals.
Grr animals. So growly animals?
Just in the old days, dating myself here.
That's
There
okay.
used to be for animals, it was kids wear. You know, they can match things together. So kids could understand how.
Taxonomy.
Yeah, their shirts, shorts, and
Mhm.
things like that.
Yeah.
For those that are a little bit older generation.
Grr animals. Okay. But yeah, that makes it matching sets. Curating your metadata wardrobe.
Right? Yeah. So then you can take that, take some of those folders
So
and replace
fancy.
them, right? Like with like, and then create that drop down list.
Yeah, totally. Metadata.
This views of beautiful things.
Yeah. Metadata. Of course, I once got some special swag from Mark Cashman. One of his sessions. I was like, well, I never metadata I didn't like. He was like, darn it. Here you go. I was like, yes, because he is the king of puns. That man is the king of puns. So if we're going to look at things from the perspective of security, getting ready for Copilot, I say this, I used to say this more because I was in doing information architecture more. Architect for your security. Let that be one of the top things on your mind. Security doesn't always follow the org chart. We kind of want it to, but it doesn't. So we can build those collaboration workspaces for the permissions and security. Don't work your permissions around the architecture. That's when you end up with Swiss cheese permissions. And when you have holes, things leak through, right? So review your areas, bless you, review your areas with guests. That's hard to do out of the box. Security management has always been a little bit difficult to do out of the box. But I think that probably applies for every software out there. I think permissions and security are always a little tricky, mostly because it's dealing with people, right? Should there be guests? And that's the number one question. No, get them out. Yes. Should they still be here? Are they active? Are they actually providing value? Do they spark joy, right? Do we know who they are and where they came from? If you don't do this now, and I'm going to say this, and I do represent a third-party tool, but I'm not selling that third-party tool. There are several of us out there in the industry. They all work a little bit different. They all have strengths and weaknesses. You can do PowerShell scripts to get all this, and you don't have to buy any third-party tool. But you will have to spend time, care, and feeding and maintaining those PowerShell scripts. You can create workflows and do all kinds of great things to go do these things. Or you can find a third-party tool. Find a way. Find a way to make sure you're keeping an eye on those guests, because it's tricky to rock a rhyme. But it's tricky to keep an eye on the people that are in your environment, especially if it's a sharing link that's doing it. Because let's say after this session wraps in 17 minutes and 50 seconds, that I send a sharing link from my OneDrive to all of you with the slides. The slides are going to be out there. It's going to happen. Copilot will not tell me that you have access to it if you haven't clicked that link yet, even though your name, I gave it your email address, but you haven't redeemed the token. If you haven't redeemed the token, you don't technically have access yet. So if I go run a report or I ask Copilot, as of right now, you don't have access to it. But you might in 90 days if I don't put an expiration on the link. Right? That once you click it, then you have access to it. So these things are tricky. Having a way to keep an eye on those shared links can be super important. Keeping an eye on the guests in your environment is very, very important. Do we have ownerless, memberless, groupless? Do we have orphaned workspaces out there? That might actually bleed into undersharing, because there may be content out there that's important, but people can't get to it anymore. Or you've got members that are in a team, in a site, and they need to be able to do stuff, but nobody has the right level of access to do it. And if for some reason, training hasn't happened in the organization, they may not even know it. They just know, well, I wish I could do this thing, but I can't. I guess that's just how it works. That can be a problem too. That's actually when shadow IT starts to creep in. That's a whole other session. Too many group owners. Too many cooks in the kitchen can be a dangerous thing. In fact, we have a customer that asked us, one of the things Orchestry does is you can put governance on content when it's being created. You have to enforce a minimum number of owners. And I love that, because how many times do you see teams set up? You got one owner, one member. It's like, couldn't this be a group chat? Do you really need a team? This customer came back and said, can you put a maximum number? It's like, never seen that really be a problem. It's like, what do you got going on? Guess how many owners, because think crazy. No, not quite. He had 863 owners in a group. Why? Especially, it wasn't even like, it wasn't everyone except external users, which you kind of think, oh, someone went crazy and just nested that. No, someone intentionally put 863 people as owners in a group. Chaos. So it is a larger customer. I showed that screenshot to our CEO. He said, we're building it. We're doing it. That's insane. But too many owners, too much permission can be a dangerous thing, especially if they've not been trained. Okay. Things to review for permissions. Private channels. Are we overusing private channels? Is there too much of that so people can't get to the content they need? Are we doing granular internal sharing? Are we just one-off doing this? If you see a lot of sharing links in your organization, but they're all internal, something's not set up right. That or people are like, are you really sure you need to share that with everybody in the organization? Why would you do that? Oh, it's just an easy link to get to. That happens a lot. If everyone in the org is the default, a lot of oversharing can happen because we like easy. We hit share, we copy link, we go. We don't really look at it. Default sharing link settings, go check, go look. My preference there is for the default sharing link to be people with existing access. Because I know Travis uploaded that file somewhere in one of our probably team sprawl situations because we're human. Travis, where's the link to that? Here you go. You don't have to think about it. Here you go, existing access. Boom, done. If we see a lot of sharing internally, we really need to think, okay, does engineering need access to this? Then why did we put it in a place that engineering doesn't have access? If we're constantly sharing with people, should we just have a cross-collab team? Right? It's a conversation to have. And it makes people uncomfortable. It's different, but it's going to make things so much easier. I had a customer once call me. We just set up Teams. Teams was new. It was bright and shiny. We did an implementation. 3 weeks later, they call me, help, Teams doesn't work. Oh, okay. What time do you want to meet? They had gone forth and built off of the examples we had done, but what they decided to do, maybe without having a conversation with their consultant, they decided to build every department as one team and then a private channel for every business area in the department. Well, now Planner doesn't work. We can't do this, and we can't do this, and we can't do this. I said, yeah, because you have torn apart and shredded the permission structure of that group. It's meant to be used together. The private channel's for like a cubby hole, where you guys just got a few sensitive things. You need to have a few private conversations. That's not where you don't work. You don't do all the team things in a private channel. The graph is absolutely going to expose those permission problems, for good or for bad. SharePoint workflows in those early days. SharePoint workflows, anytime you automate something, it's going to expose the gaps. Because you can't workflow on maybe and sometimes, right? You can't automate maybe and sometimes. The graph is going to reveal issues in security and permissions. That's one reason why we recommend starting slow and doing pilots, right? Out of date, old, incorrect things. When we look at permission reports with customers, they're like, oh, that guy's been gone for ages. That's probably not a huge deal, but it does lead to maybe needing to go back and review and see what other inaccuracies. Maybe Bob, oh, he's in that department now, but nobody cleaned him out from over here. He's still seeing stuff in R&D, and he's not in R&D anymore. Having that conversation, looking through here. Copilot is going to do what the permissions say to do. Copilot is never going to expose something to someone on its own just because. Oh, I thought Joy would love this report. I'm going to show it to Joy. Nope. Joy has permissions. Joy was given access, either accidental or on purpose. So I'm going to give this information to Joy. You cannot use security by obscurity anymore. Oversharing is so much easier than we think it is. Usually, like I said before, it's the sharing links that get us. It's having it set to org-wide. I fall into that trap probably once a week. But I'm always like, we're a small company, it's fine. No. It's governance matters, right? Getting these things right truly, truly matters. And those granular permission links, that granular security, it's going to give you risk. Yes, there are times and places you're going to need granular permissions. There is an exception to every rule. It just happens. But it should absolutely be an exception and not your rule. Know where your granular permissions are. If you want to do that all in-house, it's going to be PowerShell, PowerShell, PowerShell. Find out where they are. Make sure you have a handle on what's going on. But undersharing needs to be addressed too, because if we're too restrictive in our permissions, a whole host of issues come up. And Copilot, once again, will expose that. But if it takes an act of Congress to get access to something, how can I make my decisions on time? How are my projects going to be efficient? How frustrated are my users? I had a customer whose organization, IT didn't like Skype. So you know how long ago this was. Shut it down. No chat apps allowed in this organization. So they used Facebook Messenger right? That's exactly the face I made too. I was like, you do what? Well, everybody has it. I mean, you do have to have a username and a password to use Facebook. Right? A Shadow IT webinar happened not long after that because of meeting that customer and having that conversation. We're going to find a way to do our jobs. And if IT makes it hard or blocks it and won't listen, we're going to find a way to do it. Delayed decision-making, compliance. If I don't have access to everything I need to know, I might not know the rules. I might not know the regulations. Accidents can happen because of undersharing of information. And it's going to pile on, again, operational efficiencies. Feel these first few kind of all tie together. But then those data silos. If I can't see the full picture, am I operating efficiently, effectively, and correctly? Heck, we're in a 50-person company. And we had a conversation last week about needing to be careful we don't start splitting off into silos. Right? It's just so important to make sure everyone is on the same page, especially in a highly collaborative environment. There must be balance in the force. I cannot do a presentation without a Star Wars reference. I'm not capable. When we're thinking about permissions and security, is it a security want or a security need? Yeah, but I don't really want Joy to have access to that because she really doesn't do that. So it's fine. I'm going to put separate permissions on this library or this folder or this site because, okay. But is it a breach of security if Joy sees it? No, leave it alone. Just leave it alone. It's not a breach of security. If it's not a need, don't be overly restrictive. Process, access and job role, that looks at process. What's the process around this and who's working with the content and the data? What does that look like? Even if they're not in this part of the org chart, do these people use the data? Do we have a place to publish it to, or do we expect them to come here and get it? Have that conversation. What is the impact going to be in my organization if only a select few people have access to certain pieces of information? Is it going to be bad or is it fine? Is it a security need or security want? If we lock it down so hard people can't use it, they're going to go use something else. Shadow IT. Shadow AI is one of those new buzz phrases that I'm hearing more and more and more and more. I was at a user group, yes, in Utah last year, and a guy said he actually had to have a conversation with his company. He went to ChatGPT and showed information. He said, you know why ChatGPT knows this? Because someone in the organization put our proprietary information into ChatGPT. And it's now out there. If we don't give people the tools they need, they're going to go find other tools. Are they going to be under the umbrella of the security and protection of Microsoft 365? It's really something to think about there. Balance, balance, balance. And I think security is the biggest place where we have to really think about that balance first and then build to support it. Don't architect around things, build to enhance it. And then last, I think, but very much not least, life cycle matters. I talk about life cycle management quite a lot because if everything lives in SharePoint forever, when I go to search for the inclement weather policy because it snowed yesterday and I need to know these things, am I going to find the one from 1998? Am I going to find the one from 2005? Am I going to find the one from 2024? Which one am I going to find? It matters. So, but why though? And I'm kind of proud of myself. I made this meme the other day because I was tired of PowerPoint. You have this conversation with people, and a lot of times they're like, okay, IT wants to start deleting everything. Great. But that's not what archive means. And when I was still consulting, I would say all the time, what does archive mean to you? Does it mean delete? Does it mean move it to the file share? Does it mean putting it in Azure files? What does it mean? Because there's ways around that. And again, having this conversation a lot. Does it mean M365 archive? What does it mean? What it definitely means is it declutters your workspace. So now the graph either doesn't have access to it or it knows you don't because it's been put in an archive where you don't have permission. So it's not going to be cluttering up your Copilot results and your search results. Compliance becomes much, much, much easier because legal's not having nightmares every night because everything lives forever. And that's 5 million lawsuits just waiting to happen, right? I'm acting on relevant, correct information, which is much safer for everybody. And storage. SharePoint storage is not cheap. It just isn't. And the way SharePoint does versioning, with every one of those being a full fidelity copy, 500 versions of every file. Now, the new improvements they've made to version control is beautiful. If you haven't looked at it, look at it. You're going to save your company a lot of money. You might even open up yourself some budget for something cool. But you're going to maximize that storage, pay less for that, maybe put some more into your security efforts, and get much better performance out of the graph, out of Copilot, all that good stuff. So where do we start? Define, talk about retention policies. If we're not sure, IT can't know everything. We kind of feel like we do sometimes, but we need to sit down and talk to the business. How long are you required to keep this content? Does keep mean it needs to be active where you can put your finger on it in 5 minutes or less? Or does it mean if we get a request for it, you have a week to get it so we could put it in cold storage somewhere? What does that mean? And there are tools and ways to put labels on this so content is respected inside of the environment. Audit, clean up. How many workspaces, how many teams, how many SharePoint sites haven't been used in the last 6 months? Is that because the project got stalled and we'll be back? Or is it done and it's just sitting out there? It maybe needs to be actioned in some way. Metadata, metadata, metadata. Copilot right now doesn't use metadata exactly the way we want it to, but what it does do is it makes sure we are structuring and tagging and organizing our information efficiently for us. So if it's organized efficiently for us, it's going to be efficient for Copilot. So lots of good advantages in all these different areas. And then, just a reminder, real quick, because we're talking about AI, we're talking about governance, we're talking about security and permissions and architecture and all the really cool stuff. But people are busy. So if we're going to go in and make these sweeping changes, and we're going to like change their click pattern to be able to get through their folder structures to get to content. Those folks are juggling their full-time job, the thing they get paid to do. And we're going to be asking them to maybe change. They've got other priorities on their plate. When we come and ask them to change, that can trigger fear. Am I going to lose control of my content? Am I going to lose my content? What's going to happen? Is it going to be harder for me to do my job now? We need to be open to those questions. Have the conversation. Be responsive to the uncertainty around it. Too much change is hard. None of us like it at all. Sudden tools, sudden pilot groups, if they maybe didn't want to be on the cutting edge of a Copilot test. Changing habits is disruptive for everyone. So be patient. Remember, with the technology we are implementing and we are doing, it's to serve the people, not just because it's cool, right? So we need to make sure we're meeting the people where they are to help that adoption process. All right. And then we have come to the end of information architecture. So if we have questions, conversation, all the fun stuff. We kind of talked as we went, but feel free.
So how with your flattened architecture,
Mhm.
I know I don't understand the back end SharePoint but
Okay.
do private
Ooh.
channels create subsites or parallels?
Great question. The question is, do private channels create subsites or parallel sites? What they do is they create their own top-level site. So it is a standalone site. Because kind of that permissions best practice is you secure the largest object possible. That's going to be another site. So following that, you're saying, I need this special place with special permissions. And SharePoint goes, I got you. Site. It'll have a relationship to the team, and there's cool stuff there, but it's nice. Nice. Yes, ma'am.
Shared channels do the same thing, right?
Shared channels do as well.
The permission is restrictive.
Right. The permissions on a shared channel is you can have people that are part of the group be part of that shared channel or not. And you can bring in external collaborators. You have to do like a B2B connect and stuff. And like your tenant has to trust their tenant. At Orchestry, we use shared channels like crazy, but it's all internal. But that way I don't have to have yet another team. I can just take these channels and plug them in where I need to. No guests allowed in a shared channel though.
Private channels, that is it's just a SharePoint site. There's no planner.
Correct.
No notebook or OneNote.
Correct.
What else is
It's a very plain Jane team
there?
site.
It's just really plain Jane.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's where the struggle comes in a lot when people share things like the planner or the OneNote. They're like, why can't I?
Because the group's not there. Yeah. You have said I need a subset of these people. You don't get the whole group. Exactly right. Excelente. All right.
Yeah, you made a comment about like if you're externally sharing or sending sharing links, you have out of a private or a group, you've got something misconfigured. Like you should be moving sharing stuff to groups that accommodate sharing. Does that extend as well to like external collaborators? The customer is very
Okay.
heavily externally collaborating. They've got a lot of different small instances where they're like, oh, we need to get someone from outside the org to get a couple of files. Is it best to I can see it being really complicated to break
Right.
that off into every new external collaborator gets new groups.
Yeah.
To group them together and we have external collaboration. Like,
Maybe.
how do you think about that?
Maybe. So again, the question is like, if you're doing a lot of sharing and we think, well, we just need to architect to facilitate the sharing instead of doing sharing links a lot. A shared channel might be a thing, but I tell you, if it's like, okay, we have these documents that this person needs to go pick up. If they just need to grab it and go, and it's not like this actual collaboration project or process, I'm a fan of actually creating like a mail, I don't want to say the name of another product, but almost like a Dropbox site, but not capital D Dropbox. Okay, just so we're clear. Where like, let's use a workflow or have a Power Automate or something that said move to, and go drop a copy of those where they can just go pick them up. I say a copy, and maybe it doesn't need to be a copy. Maybe you're moving it out of that site and saying, and we've got groups set up in our permission groups or whatever makes sense where they can just go grab those things. If it's always the same people all the time, maybe you do look at a shared channel or even a separate team. So there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice that. But I would say if it's a habit to always be sharing and those links aren't being expired or something like that, it would be good to look at a way to just support that in its own place. All right. All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. See you guys around the conference.